This is a photo from the 20th anniversary. So this is 30 years ago. The actual newspaper is here, and there's some copies if somebody would like to take a copy with them. But do you recognize any of the people in this photo? So they're still, so 30 years ago, we got Manju. So you're here from that photo. And of course, Ranjit was there with you. And we have a very young looking David and Owen, about like you do today. All right, David, your hair's pretty close. So it might be a little bit darker in the photo. It's probably just because it was a newspaper. I don't know. So it's wonderful to celebrate the things as we go and hit milestones. And so that's what we're doing today. We're celebrating. I'm going to now invite Bob Smith to come up, and he's going to share a bit about how this church got started and a little bit of the history. And then we have a number of other people who are going to share as well after Bob finishes. So Bob, it's an honor to have you, and thank you.
Thank you so much. I just I haven't even started yet. Oh, I was so moved by that song that we sang together. All my life you have been faithful. And it really touched my heart as I sang that, because, you know, as we get older, we look back on our lives and we think of the things we've done, the places we've been, the people that we've met, and God has been faithful. It reminded me that when I was 9 years of age, I went after school to a tent mission we had in Sydney, and we had a child evangelist there talking, and I can't remember much about it, but I can remember signing a little card, and I've still got the card, signed on the 18th of April, 1952, 9 years of age, that I'd given my life to Jesus. I had no idea what that would have meant then, but through the years it's developed for me. And I do know that I ran all the way home to show my mother the card, and she was ironing on the kitchen table. And when she put the iron up and then she gave me a big, big hug, I kind of realised that what I'd done must have been something special. And it was. And we look back today for the commencement of the work here in Blaney. Actually, it probably started before, before I arrived on the scene. And I have a copy here I will leave for you. 50 years ago, the order of service that we had, who was here, and it was Don Eagle was the area superintendent at the time, the Western Regional Superintendent, and then there were comments made. But I'll leave this here. You will have somewhere where you put historical items, and you can include this one. But the message was given by the Reverend J.C. Campbell, who was then the president of the Baptist Union of New South Wales. But I simply wrote in this, this project was born in the minds and hearts of a few, and being clearly God's design and time, many folk have assisted us to this moment of commencement. The future of this work will depend on the continued support, interest, and prayer of the numbers who stand today with us. Thank you for your encouragement and assistance. So I'll leave that here. But early in 1973, I arrived from Glen Innes. That was my first church out of Theological College, to Millthorpe as the pastor, but with a clear assignment to begin a new Baptist venture here in Blaney, just 11 kilometres south of Millthorpe. The Reverend Don Eagle was the area superintendent of our WDBA at the time, and a very special man in my life. He was the pastor of the Long Beach Baptist Church when I was about 18 or 19. When I began to think about being a pastor, I wanted to be like Don Eagle. He was down to earth. He was connecting with people. He was there in people's lives in a beautiful way. So that was special. I soon connected with others who were aware of the hope of starting a work here in Blaney. And so we're celebrating this morning 50 years of Baptist ministry and witness to Blaney. Let me mention that I relished the idea of developing some strategies to see ideas implemented. Now, can you imagine? I was 32 years of age. I had hair then, a lot of it, but I had a real kind of desire in my heart to get busy on the assignment. The diaconate of the Millthorpe Church were very supportive of these new directions and let me loose on the efforts. We were able to secure a property here in Blaney at that time for about $11,000, if my memory is right. A big old home surrounded by a big hedge, and it needed a lot of work to make it a place where we could gather. And so the old home, as I'm writing here, needed some renovations to fit our purpose. The Orange Baptist Church, with Reverend Clive Smith, their then pastor, invited me to speak at one of their members' meetings in Orange. Now, I've got to tell you, it was a most memorable night. It was raining. I can remember I dressed up for the occasion. I wanted to make a bit of an impression. But when I was there, I put out the idea that we could have a big working bee and clear up the property, do some renovations. We knocked out some walls and did the repaint and all of that. But as I say, someone there after the meeting invited me back for a cup of tea, which I was happy to accept. But when I went out of the building, it was raining and a lady had difficulty starting her car. So, I thought, I'll give a hand. I pushed her. She jump-started the car and away she went. But I was wet. So as I drove towards the home that I was going to, I went down Byng Street in Orange, and there's a big convent there. And I looked up and it was on fire. And I thought, this is a challenge. I pulled over, ran over, I met another man who, with me, we tried to get in to the convent. I think I hit the front door and went back through the gate, but then I went around the back, climbed the stairs, got a bucket, filled it with water, opened one of the school rooms there, and through this bucket, I mean, really, I'm no fireman. And I heard the door close behind me, and I'm in the room. But when I got to the handle, it was very hot, and I got out. But as I got out, I could hear firemen coming up the stairs. And some of those firemen were from the Orange meeting. What are you doing here, Bob? I had no idea what I was doing there. But here I was, just a massive steam from the wet suit. And then, then I realised that there were some nuns coming out, and they were in night attire. Who are you? I said, I'm the pastor of the Baptist Church in Millthorpe. And you've never seen nuns in night attire before? No, I haven't actually, But anyway, I went home then. the next morning I had a phone call from the Orange Police. They wanted to know how I got in there and how I got involved and what was my involvement. And I think I settled their mind okay. And then a little later on, I had a phone call from the ABC. They said to me, Pastor Bob Smith, yes, we believe that you were involved in the most unusual ecumenical event last night. I said, yes, I was. Well, you know, it was very, very special. 50 years on, the work grew. And in those early days after the commencement, I thought to myself, how can I get connected with the people in Blaney? And I went to the high school and I taught scripture in the primary school, and always loved doing that. But I could always remember that the pungent smell in Blaney in those days, the abattoir was busy. So I decided that I contacted a group in Sydney called ITIM, Interchurch Trade and Industry Mission, about going ahead and getting involved with the abattoir as a chaplain, which I began that process. And then they said, well, we would like you to speak to the workers. And there were about 300 people there, mainly men, some women, all blood-covered outfits with all sorts of blades at their side. And they accepted that I would be their chaplain to the abattoir. Well, that was that. As I say, I connected with the Blaney High School, and in 1975, towards the end of that year, the senior student from Blaney High came to me. They knew that in their new work we were starting a Friday night connection for younger people just to come. And we did that. And he said, every year, the year 12 students raise money for a good cause. We would like to do something for you. What would you need? And at that time, we would have appreciated a good sound system, you know. So they decided that that was going to be their project for that year. And so they raised money by riding dinkies. Everyone know what a dinky is, a little tiny sit-on thing. Well, year 12 students riding dinkies up and down Adelaide Street must have been quite a sight. But also by other means, we raised some money. And then on the evening of their graduation from Blaney High, I went along. There would have been about 300 people there, and they presented me with this gift. So they were some of the early connection points. But I look back now on the memories of so many people who joined us in those early days. And many of them are now with us. They are with God in heaven. And it'll be interesting to meet up again. This past week, I've spoken with Nathan Durr, who is the present pastor of the Orange Baptist Church, and I've sent him some details about what was happening here today. So now here in Blaney, I'm thankful for my connection with Brad and you good people here, and thank you that that you've invited me for this occasion. God calls us to serve him, to worship him, to love him, to express that love. You know, and I've brought along this morning a little comment here. I'll put it over here for a little while. It's simply called risk. Now, somebody one time said, how do you spell faith? And they said R-I-S-K, risk, venture, trusting God, doing things that you might feel a little uncomfortable at doing, but you do it. And a pastor friend of mine many years ago gave me this. It's a picture of a sailboat there, but it says, you cannot discover new oceans unless you have the courage to lose sight of the shore. I'll repeat that. You cannot discover new oceans unless you have the courage to lose sight of the shore. The Bible is full of people who have ventured in faith. And in fact, the 11th chapter of the book of Hebrews talks about all the people who by faith ventured and trusted God. And I'd like just to read the opening verses of chapter 12, a passage that has always been very special for me. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great crowd of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. I love this. Fixing our eyes on Jesus. Fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. And then verse 3 says, consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you may not grow weary and lose heart. That's what we do every week, isn't it? We come together to consider him. And Brad reminded us earlier in our service that this is why we're here. We're here to honour him, to realise that he has called us. We are his sons and daughters. But you know what? I love that. But I also love it when I realise that I am his servant as well. We are servants together. It's a beautiful thing to be in a fellowship of God's people. And through the years, certainly God has blessed me in all that I have sought to do, and God has blessed you here. And I know that Brad, Joan is going to come and say a few words. And I hope, Joan, you agree with all the things I've said. Anyway, I want to thank you.
Well, thank you, Bob. Yes, we'll have Joan come up next, and then we have David and Owen who are going to share as well. So I will let Joan share what she would like to.
I get out of my comfort zone up here, but anyway, that's, as Bob said, that song, All My Life You Have Been Faithful, and that always makes me a bit emotional too. Well, I'd just like to tell you a little bit about the history of the Millthorpe Baptist Church, because without the vision and foresight of the members of that church to plant a church in Blaney over 50 years ago, BCBC may not be what it is today. And I think we're the only ones that are left that were involved at the time. It was an exciting and joyous occasion on the 15th of February 1975, when after much prayer and God's leading and lots of hard work, that vision came to fruition. When Peter and I were married in 1967, 58 years ago in a couple of days actually, the members were then planning an outreach to Blaney. Dalton Armstrong, John's grandfather, was pastor, and Peter's sister and brother-in-law, Reg and Marlene Johnson, were already running a Sunday school in the community centre. But God had laid on the hearts of the Millthorpe Church, which was a thriving church at the time, to plant a church in Blaney. Then in 1973, Bob arrived, youthful, enthusiastic and energetic, and what a joy that was. Now I'm going to repeat a bit here of what Bob said actually. Bob is a man of many stories and seems to attract situations that make stories. Even saving nuns in a nunnery in Orange once when he noticed it was on fire when driving past. And with his sense of humour, every time he relates a story, it gets better. He also had a habit of running out of petrol in his car, which led to many interesting situations at times. I don't know whether that still happens today. We were indeed blessed by his presence and his ministry. So the search began to find a suitable building, and as most of you know, the old home in Ogilvie Street was purchased and the hard work began. The Orange Baptist Church were wonderful, helping with the major renovations of making a rundown old building into a place where God's name could be exalted. And it was also a time of fun and fellowship. But I'm sure Bob will fill you in on the details, which he already has. Meanwhile, Millthorpe was declining. It was an ageing congregation and no younger ones attending. During the 1980s, we joined the Orange congregation, mainly for the sake of the children, as they were the only ones in the Sunday school and not getting much out of it, and they had cousins in Orange. Then Kate was about 11. We came down one Sunday and it was like coming home. John Wiggins was pastor at the time. He grew up in the Millthorpe Church, went to Bible college, then went to the Solomon Islands as a missionary for many years. Two others who grew up in the Millthorpe Church and went on to serve God were Ian Flatters, a missionary in New Guinea for many years, and Richard Kingham, who is an ordained Baptist minister serving in churches in Queensland, including the Brisbane Baptist Tabernacle, and has only recently retired. Sadly, in 2000, with only 4 elderly faithful ladies attending, and after almost a century of preaching God's word, the difficult decision was made to sell the Millthorpe Church. It holds many treasured memories for us. Peter's parents had been married there in 1936, both of his sisters and a number of other family members. Our daughter Kate said, "Dad, I want you to buy the church because when I get married, I want to be married in that church." She didn't even have a boyfriend at that stage. Well, Peter did bid and was actually the losing bidder, and I thank God for that. It sold for $96,000 and was sold again a couple of years ago for over $1 million, but had been made into a lovely home. The old Sunday school hall, moved from the Bathurst Army camp in the early 1950s, was demolished and a straw bale building erected, recycling the windows, floorboards and anything else they could use. So it's been a joy to worship here in Blaney, albeit seeing many changes over the years. Who would have thought that years down the track we would have an old pub to worship in? Thanks to David Hoadley for finding this building and being able to see the potential. So as we celebrate 50 years of Blaney Community Church, we give thanks to God for his direction and leading and for the vision and foresight of those faithful servants many years ago. I'm sure they would be proud and humbled to see what BCBC has become today. And may Blaney Community Baptist Church always be a lighthouse shining brightly in the Blaney community. God is good.
Well, thank you, Joan. We'll now have, which one of you would like to go first, David? Just so I know how high to put this.
I was just told I had to go first. She can correct all the things I say wrong. We started coming to the Baptist church, I'm pretty sure it was 1979. We'd been married 5 years then. We went to the Methodist church before that time, and it was pretty much the vote there on becoming the uniting church, which was the catalyst to make us come here. But we'd been coming to the Bible study for a number of years prior to that, and we had our young friends who worshipped at the Baptist church, so that was the catalyst for that happening. I might talk a bit about the journey with properties and buildings and so forth. And as Joan and Bob have said, the church started off in Ogilvy Street in the old house. And we met there for many years. And when Sid came, I'm pretty sure it was when Sid came, we outgrew the house and it became somewhat congested. So we started meeting in the primary school, and we met there for quite a few years during Sid's time. And then we sold Ogilvy Street, or probably a little bit before that. Back in the 80s, the Millthorpe Church, when they didn't have a pastor anymore, decided to sell the manse in Millthorpe, and they bought a manse in Blaney. I can't remember the name of the street now.
Norton Street.
Norton Close, that's right, Norton Close. So we had a manse there, and that was kept in the church as an asset. During the early 80s, when we became involved, the initial renovations of the old house had taken place. The rooms had been expanded to have a meeting room, but the kitchen was still needed to be upgraded. So the early 80s saw the upgrading of the kitchen, and I'm pretty sure it was Guy Mia Baptist Church who would come up for weekends at a time and work with us and do that. And Reg and Marlene were involved, and the Orange Baptist Church had a close involvement in helping as well. So that was done. Moved to the school. The school provided our needs for quite a few years. Then we decided to sell the house, the old house, and the Johnson family purchased that from the church, and that went very well. In the meantime, the Millthorpe Church, the block of land behind the Millthorpe Church, was sold several years before the main church. I'm not sure how many, only a couple of years, I think, as a vacant block. Then the Millthorpe Church, as Jane mentioned, was sold. Then that money went into trust for the work in the Blaney area. But with the Baptist Union Property Trust, which owns our property, you had to make application when you wanted to do something else with the funds. And in the meantime, the church had a small block of land at Forest Reefs, which everyone had forgotten about. And it was only a 1/4 acre building block. We sold the church and it got shifted into Millthorpe. I'm not sure where that is. I haven't seen it.
It's in the main street, but it's behind one of the shops.
Yes. So the old church got shifted in there. We sold the block of land. So the money from the sale of the Millthorpe block of land, the Millthorpe church, the Forest Reefs block, and the manse all got pooled at Baptist Union Property Trust. The church in the early 2000s bought a property in Martha Street, a big house on a large block of land, with a view to developing it into a church, but it never quite worked out for various different reasons. I think the church went through a little bit of a tough time, and it was expensive to do that sort of development. Subsequently, that block was sold, and the money went back to the property trust again, and we bought a block of land out at the industrial estate with a view to building a new church. And Ron Havenhand, who was a member of our congregation, was an architect, and Ron designed a church for us, and that looked like the direction we were going to go in, but we were going to have to borrow a significant amount of money to be able to make it happen. And one day I was driving to work, which I drove to work to Orange for nearly 20 years, to work for the Rural Fire Service, and I drove past here one day and I noticed a for sale sign on the front of this building, and it had been there for 12 months, but I'd never really noticed it. I knew it was for sale, but it never clicked in my mind that this might be a good place for the church. And when we used to grow chickens, we used to sell chickens to the restaurant here back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I remember coming in here a number of times to bring chickens into the kitchen. And I remember this room. And I just had this thought one day going to work that this might work. And that big room in the back would be a good church room. So we got together and we had a look, and Andrew Parkinson was our pastor at the time. So it was in 2015 that we decided to purchase this building, and we had enough money to buy it, renovate it. It cost us $350,000 to buy it. We got our GST back, so it only cost us $318,000, and we had about $70,000 in the bank that we could fix it up and do the renovations we needed to do, which we did, and we moved in. And then very soon after we moved in, we had a water leak upstairs, flooded the place out, and we had to put an insurance claim in, and the insurance spent another $80,000 to fix up the damage that had all the work that we just recently done. So yeah, things have changed. We don't own a manse anymore, but we have this building. Once we sold the block of land out at the industrial estate a few years ago, we did have a small loan on that. That's been cleared. So the church is in a very fortunate position now that we don't owe any money. We own this building. We've got a good, strong church, and we're very thankful for the contribution everyone has made over the years. And just the pastors over the time. There was Bob, of course, in those early years. When Bob went to Bathurst Church still continued to support us, even though you weren't the direct pastor, Bob. You'd come up many Sundays. We remember you visiting after the Bathurst service or before the Bathurst service. And then lay preachers from Bathurst continued to help us for a while. When you left Bathurst and went to Sydney, Orange Church took us under their wing, and Rob Beeston was here for a period. We had John and Ruth, of course. When we purchased the manse, I think from memory, Gary Lockyer was the first pastor then. Then after Gary, there was Mac Finlayson. That's Mac there with the beard. Then we had Robert Griffiths, and John came a couple of times. And you lived on the family property at near Spring Hill. And then Sid came for an extended period. It was 12 years, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah.
12 years of Sid. Then we had Andrew, and now we've got Brad. So it's been quite a long history. So we've enjoyed being here, bringing our children up here, and being involved for all those years. And Auntie Margaret there, she was the first treasurer. I used to help her by putting the numbers on the computer back in the early days, and she couldn't quite accept how the computer helped. But anyway, I looked up yesterday to try and find out when I started doing that, but my computer doesn't think back that far anymore. So it was in the very early 80s I started doing that. And I think I've been doing the book since about 1984. So anyway, I know the history of that part of it. Thank you.
I think I'm sure. Thanks, Brad. Oh, it's just lovely to have this time to remember, and lovely to see John and Ruth Wiggins, who, of course, Bob actually, I'm not sure it's coincidental, but he left when we came. So, yeah, John and Ruth were our first pastor, and they were such a team together. And of course, over here we have Julie Shepherd, Julie and Roger. Roger was secretary, wasn't he? Yes. Do you vaguely remember what years? No. Was it 70s or 80s? What did it mean? The late 70s, wasn't it? Yeah, and then into the 80s. And then, of course, Megan, you were
A wee young lass.
a wee young lass indeed, and your big sister was a little older, and Tim didn't even, he was born in Sydney, so, but that's the Shepherd family, and of course it's now Megan Pepper and family, so Rob there with their latest little person, and how old is she?
6 weeks old.
6 weeks old, so they have a very long association with this church. I was delighted that they were able to come along. And of course, yeah, Kate and my daughter Sarah, they were best buddies from when they first got together and still continuing friendship. We talked about God being the centre of who we, were obviously honouring through all we did. But when I was thinking of stories, I thought of 2 times that the Hoadleys decided to take centre stage. First one was David was, you can see that veranda roof there? He was on it, trying to repair it. Unfortunately, he collapsed and he fell through it, dislocated his shoulder. They had to get and they couldn't move it at all, so they had to get the ambulance and cart him off to Orange Base Hospital, and then it was relocated. So that was a bit of a drama for him that I recall vividly. And then my way of stealing all the attention was one Sunday service. I was singing a hymn with great enthusiasm, and all of a sudden everything went black and woozy, and next thing I knew, Dr. Ranjit Barui was carrying me up the church aisle, and there was a big bench at the back, and I passed out, and that was a rather dramatic way of announcing to everyone I was expecting my first baby. So, yeah, there were 2 items when the Hoadleys sort of took centre stage and took everyone's attention. But it's been a lovely church to be part of over so many years. It's always been a family, caring church. We've got many happy memories of many people as we reflected on, have come and gone. And of course, like all churches and all families, we had times when things were not always wonderful. And there were some broken relationships and difficult times. And I think it was, for me, it's always been that in a church, just like a normal family, we have to practice what Jesus said. If your brother or sister sins against you, go and show him his fault just between the 2 of you. If they listen, you have won them over. And that principle, I think, has applied all through the years, that if you've got an issue in the family, go sort it out with that person, because that's the best place to sort things out. And then if that's not working, then you can go and talk to one of the leaders and get some more help. But it's in putting into practice, as Bob said, it's not all about asking Jesus into your heart and then that's it. It's about all the practical things that Jesus told us that we have to then put into practice, so that will bear fruit in our church family, because there'll be times that we need to love and times we need to forgive, and that then brings a healthy church that can go on into the future, which is what the whole intention. We've got very little people here, and some of us are getting older, and we want to see Jesus' love and life-changing principles go on for each and every person who comes to this church. So yeah, I've been blessed to be part of this community for a long time. It kind of helps for until last week, we lived way out of town. Well, not too far, but 20 minutes drive out the other side. And so that meant things were a bit rocky at church. Did you have an easy option to go church shopping? And no. The challenge was, this is where you got to work things out. And I think that's something that is a principle that makes churches real if you stick at it and work it out, if it's all possible with God's help. And then you've got firm, strong foundations to keep growing and keep moving on for whatever life brings, that God will sustain us through all the challenges. So yeah, it's been a great journey, and I look forward to getting up to Ruth's age and still being active like she is. I won't.
You won't.
I won't say how many, but she's a few ahead of me. So, thank you.
We're just going to have real quick. Sylvia has a message from Charles. So, Manju's been here pretty much all these 50 years, haven't you, Manju? Or
Since 77.
Since 77. So that would be 48 years. And so Sylvia and Charles grew up here. Charles visited from Melbourne a couple weeks ago, so wasn't able to come back again. But Sylvia just has a little message from him. So Sylvia, if you'd like to come up.
Just before I read out Charles's message, just on the spot, I just wanted to speak about my time here very quickly. When we came to Blaney, when my parents settled in Blaney, we obviously attended the Baptist church because we were from the Baptist background, and so traditionally church going was very important to us, and I do remember that cold room, where the drafts just kept coming in, and it doesn't matter how many heaters you had on, it was bitterly cold. But I think we were always warmed by the message of hope in Christ and the fellowship afterwards, of God's people, with God's people. I taught Sunday school for a little while, but now when I look back and that I know my knowledge and my understanding of the Bible has grown and I've matured, I realized what a terrible job I did then of it, and I wish I could have gone back to those days, but never mind. I've come to realize that Sunday school is more than just stories of miracles of Christ, and at the moment at our church we're looking at Matthew, and we're looking at the healing of various people, and I realized that the biggest story of that is the ultimate healing, of our sin, and and being in fellowship with God, and as Jesus, says, what is easier to say, that your sins are forgiven or that you're healed, and that really struck me again, as I thought about my Sunday school teaching days. I was baptized at the Milford Baptist Church, and in the middle of July, I couldn't have chosen a better day. And I remember getting out of the, what's it called, the baptism, and being whisked away to the back room by Margaret Dowell, who just stripped me naked. And I was just in such a shock from the cold, coming out of into the cold room and then being stripped naked like that. Obviously, child protection policies were not. And then I was just rubbed furiously by Margaret with warm towels, to stop me from shivering, and got dressed. Kate, I was lucky enough to be married at Millthorpe Church, and it was, it was really beautiful. The Sydney people, my husband Homer, his friends, many of his friends came, and being from the financial market, one of the things they just kept saying, they just couldn't get over how quaint the town was and how quaint the church was and all that, But, I do remember, John, I still have kept the prayer that you prayed on that wedding day of ours, and of all the things, I think there's a line, and I'm not probably saying the exact line, but I've always remembered that, and it has been so helpful in my married life, where you prayed and you said, Lord, something like, may they not be tempted to steal, if they're in poverty, and may they not be callous in their love for you in their riches, and that has been just so helpful to me as I've experienced both those things in my married life. I sort of I think about the church buildings here. Yes, as David said, the stories, and David, your vision's just been so great, for the Blaney Church and its building now. But the great thing I think of having a church in a pub is to make people realize that God doesn't live in buildings. God lives in the hearts of people, and actually having a pub as a church is just so great. I think it's just, I think it sort of welcomes people in, because they don't sort of have that stereotyped idea about what a church is, and what is expected of them, of their behaviour, etc. But that all is welcome, and that's what a pub is. Pub is traditionally for a country town, especially, just been, and I think Charles will say the rest in terms of the teaching of this church. But I just want to say that it's just so great to have a church that is so faithfully teaches God's word, and not just that, but loves the people within the church and within the community, and it's just so welcoming of everyone, and it's just so lovely to know that it's all about extending God's kingdom here. So anyway, going to Charles's message. Sorry, I didn't expect this. It just came in this morning, first thing, and so I thought, it'd be lovely to read this. It just says, good morning, sis. I just remembered that today is the 50th anniversary service of Blaney Baptist Church. Please pass on to Brad our many good wishes and disappointment of not being able to join in the celebration. It is a testament of God's vision to establish his house in a small community like Blaney, so his message of hope, salvation, mercy, grace, and love can be shared, heard, and embraced by the people in the community. Can't believe that the Brewery family has been a part of the marvellous journey for 49 years of the 50 years, and watched the growth of the church through the wonderful ministry and work of his servants like Bob, Gary, John, Sid, and Brad, and others if I've forgotten them. Many congratulations, and again, sorry we couldn't join in, but look forward to going through the posts on the website or Facebook. Thank you.
Right, can I just say something?
Yes.
Speaking about all these, establishing the church in Millthorpe or whatever, my great-grandfather established the Baptist church in Orange and Millthorpe back in 1849 or something. Books here about it. So it's all new news to me, 50 years.
Yes. Thank you, buddy. Well, thank you so much for those stories, for sharing. I'm sure for the people, whether you've been here for a short period or a long period, hearing about that would have. Janet, you wanted to say something? Yeah. Yeah.
What I can recall.
Yes.
I didn't come here till 85.
Yes.
The beauty of coming here, look, I didn't know anyone when I came here, because my husband went to Greenfield Hockey to start work there as a cycle. And because I was looking around for a Baptist church, so I went to church in Sydney. So I found the Baptist church, and it was the Wigginses that were running it. Well, I couldn't help but praise the Lord, because I met the Wigginses when I was working at the SSEM mission, when they were coming through as missionaries to go on the mission field. So I knew them way back then. So I just thought, wow, I've come to a church and I know the pastor and his wife. So I was really grateful for that. And when I came, I had like 2 little boys, and then I had Deborah. And Margaret, who was at that church there when I went there, she was the loveliest lady. I don't know. She was an interesting lady, but I loved her. I had Deborah, and she perked up all over me as a baby. And Margaret, she just come on down, and she took me out the back. She cleaned me up, and then she took me over to her place, which was across from the church then, and gave me another blouse to wear. And I've never forgotten the kindness that she showed. And I was new to the church then. There are other things. Sunday school. Sunday school has been a big thing in my life. Very big thing in my life. And it started there. And I know that we had Sunday school, and then we went through tough times. Things happened, and it shrunk, and we had just a couple. And I turned around and I said to Owen one day, I said, we'll start Sunday school again. So I started it out the back in the kitchen. I think I only had about 4 kids, something like that. I think it was Simon and Robert, and probably you. Okay, yeah, and Colin's daughter. It must have been something like that. There was just a few, and we started out that way. Anyhow, things changed, and minister and everything else happened, and it started to grow again. And it grew. So I think by the time we left that house, or that church, we had quite a size Sunday school, and we went to the school, and we did Sunday school there too. So we were able to borrow one of their rooms out the back. So I took the kids out the back there, and it just continued to grow. And of course, we moved on again and ended up here, and I got Sunday school continuing to go here. But what I found looking back, it was such a blessing that the Lord continued to bless me with Sunday school, with children, and growing up and all. And it's just good memories looking back, thinking, wow, Lord, and we had our ups and downs, but He got the Sunday school growing again. And He just blessed me knowing with all the kids that I had, and the teachers that helped me out, especially here.
Thank you, Janet. And as we share, I know